Hi everybody, I just thought that I would make a quick video explaining the remainder of the coursework for 23-21 this term. I sat down and I really thought about what would be the essentials for us to finish that you could work at your own pace to get them completed and what would be the deadlines for those things. So I made a little chart to help you and I thought that I would go through it and then that way you can fit it into your schedule, whatever else you've got going on in your other courses, so that you can still meet the requirements for this course, but have a little more leeway in terms of when you get things done. So you can see that I set up a chart here, and there were 4 literary periods that we needed to finish going through, but I reduced that to 3. I took out the 17th century and the Restoration and just focused on the last 3 that we would need. So that helped us reduce the amount of work that we would need to do. So the first period that I want you to look at is the Romantic period. For each one of these 3 periods, the Victorian and then the 21st century and after, I have set up a system where there's a slideshow and then there's a video of me going through the slideshow with you, just like I did in previous presentations. So, and then here are the page numbers of the background material that is covered in the slideshow and the video. So you can just watch the video, you could access the slideshow, etc. for each period. So there's one set up for the Romantic period, there's one set up for the Victorian era, and there's one set up for the 20th century and after. And really I tried to limit the amount of material that was on each one of those slideshows just down to the very, very basics. So understand that I'm not giving you a really broad understanding of these time periods. I'm skimming the surface just so that we can finish out the year so that you have a basic idea of what happens in those time periods. Okay, so then I put in a date when I will hold a live online discussion. Maybe we'll do some notes, Q&A, we'll talk about the pieces, etc. So starting a week from now, next Tuesday will be the first one. Now you do not need to attend those. If you feel like you can't get to this stuff until later, that's fine. But I will make the video available to you so that if you don't tune into the live session, then you can watch it at a later time. Okay, so then for each time period, I also picked out representative pieces. So usually it's just 2 or 3 pieces. With the Romantics, there were 4 because I needed to get this piece of nonfiction in. But they're usually poetry and for the most part very short. Even this prose piece is just 4 pages. So I didn't pick anything long. I picked all short pieces. And so these pieces, you need to read them. I put the page numbers on here for each book, depending on which one you have. And the link here goes to a PDF, but they are in your textbook. So read the representative pieces and then reflect on how those demonstrate qualities of that time period. So I selected these particularly because they show qualities that are mentioned in the video. And then move on to the next period. So there's the Victorian era and then there's the 20th century and after, and that brings us up to date with where we are with literature now. And for each period, same thing. I picked just the basics. In the Victorian era, I only picked 2 short poems. So it's just really poetry from then on. And then there is a quiz. So there are really only 2 more grades that remain that you need to do. One is a quiz that will cover all 3 of these periods. So once you've read the material and watched the videos and studied up on those 3, there's an online quiz over all 3 of them. This is an open notes quiz. So as long as you have good notes, you should do fine on the quiz. It will be on Schoology and it will be timed, but like I said, you'll be able to use your notes, so as long as you have good notes, you should do just fine. You need to do that quiz sometime before May 13th, and I know that sounds like it's a while off, it's about a month away, but my grades are still due according to STC. They haven't changed the dates that grades are due. So my grades are due on the 18th for STC. So I want to make sure that you finish that quiz by the 13th of May so that I have time to look it over and get it into the grade book and all that stuff. The only other assignment that you need to do is a literary analysis essay. And remember we talked about how there were 2 papers for this class. We already did the long research paper, that one's out of the way, but there is a shorter literary analysis essay that you need to do. And if you click right here, it will take you to the document about that, and I'll click on it in a second. And that one is due Saturday the 9th. That way I have time to read them before the grades are due. This is a 4-page paper. So if you click on it, it'll bring up the essay, and I can just go through this briefly with you. I'm pretty sure that you can handle this. It's nothing that we haven't done previously in the semester or last semester. You need to write a minimum 4-page paper. This is not a research paper. You will not be using outside sources. You will read one of these stories. I listed 6 different options from your textbook. You'll read one of those stories, and then you will make an observation yourself about that work, an original observation, and then the paper will support that observation. So literary analysis just means I'm reading something, and here is something that I observed about it, something literary that I observed. So I made some notes here about literary analysis and what we mean by that. But basically, you're making an insightful observation. It could be about theme, imagery, characterization. It could be about the style of narration. It could be about plot. It can be about structure. It can be about word choice. It can be any combination of those things. And so there's some notes here about that. And so the only source you're using is the text. Everything in there is unique that you came up with as you were reading the story. So 4 pages for that in MLA as usual. I did put some example thesis statements here, and we can talk about this paper a little later in one of the live sessions if you want. But I put some sample thesis statements here that would be about 4 pages long if we were going to go into it. And they're good examples of thesis statements. Also on the 2nd page of this document are some complete paper examples. So if you needed to see what a paper looks like, but you've done literary analysis before, but in case you wanted to see some examples, there are some here. And then here are also some resources that will help you structure, make a good thesis, develop your paragraphs, do a conclusion, etc. I found some sources here that will be able to help you. So that's just an overview of that paper. Now you can do this anytime that you like. You don't have to wait until you get to the 20th century to do that, this material. It's up to you as long as I get it by Saturday the 9th. And these are the last 2 grades that you'll be required to do. So once you get those 2 done, the quiz that's on Schoology and the literary analysis essay, then you're done for the term. You might be asking, what about the exam? And if you go to the next page, here you'll see that I've decided that the exam will be optional. STC wants me to give an exam. It's usually required, but I'm making an executive decision since we had a midterm that was required. I'm going to make the final exam optional. The final exam would have covered everything from Paradise Lost through the end of the semester. But I think that with the quiz and the paper that you're writing, that's sufficient. So you can decide for yourself whether or not you want to take the final exam. If you do decide to take the final exam, maybe you look at your average and you think, well, if I take the exam, that can improve my average overall, then that's fine. I need you to let me know by Friday, May 1st so that I can prepare the study guide and send it to you, and you have time to take the exam before Friday, May 15th, because I need to have that graded by May 18th for STC. I don't know if we'll be back in school by then or not, so I'm kind of going on the assumption that we might or we might not, and so it might be online, the test, or it might be in person, depending on what you decide. I will tell you, though, that if you decide to take the exam, the grade will count. This is not going to be a situation where, oh, let me take the exam, and if I do horribly, then it won't count against me. The exam will count. So use that as part of your decision making if you decide to take the final exam. I'm not going to make it super hard on purpose, but it's going to be normal type tests that I give. I would say equivalent to the midterm. So if you aren't really sure how you would do on the exam, I think try to do really, really well on the paper and the quiz and see where your average is, and maybe you won't need to do the exam. But I do want to give it as an option in case there are some people who want to study for the exam and bring up their grade that way, because it does have a significant weight. If you decide not to take the exam, then I'll just take your semester average that you have at the end of turning in these last 2 assignments, and put that in for your semester exam so that it won't change your overall percentage. So if any questions about that, or you're not sure how the exam situation is going to work, you can let me know. But you do need to decide by May 1st. If I don't hear from you by May 1st that you want to take the exam, then I'll assume that you are not taking the exam. If nobody's taking the exam, then I don't need to write one. I'm glad to write one if you decide that you want to do an exam, but it's not going to be required. So I'm hoping that this setup toward the end here is enough to give you some freedom to work at your own pace. I've really limited the number of assignments that we have here toward the end with just these two things. And we also have some online discussion times set up so that we can go over the time periods also. So if you have any questions or aren't sure about something that's on this chart, communicate with me. You can text me, you can email me. We have lots of ways to communicate, and I hope to see you for some of the online discussion times starting next week. Take care, everybody.